when you open the door for somebody else.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast, The Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. And I am Melissa. And
hey, guys, I'm Dr. Bob. I guess that's kind of obvious by the title. You probably just call it the vaccine conversation.
How about the vaccine combo?
Yeah,
okay, so anyway, we just finished talking about a whole bunch of topics that we're going to cover in the months to come. And this one is so interesting for me. And what we're going to talk about today is media sound bites and catchphrases regarding the vaccine debate. So in this vaccine conversation, what do we see with media, sound bites, and catchphrases? And we're going to actually go into the catchphrases that you tend to hear, and we're going to talk about what's behind that. And from my perspective, why this is so concerning, that there is such a thing as media catchphrases when it comes to a public health situation. Like, there shouldn't be media catchphrases because this should not be a marketing campaign, but yet we see that it is.
Right, I know. Medicine should be so wonderful and 100% safe and so good for you that it shouldn't need any PR. And then there shouldn't be any media sound bites.
It should always be truthful. So what you're saying should just always be factual. So therefore, there wouldn't be any need to skew it one way or the other. Because we all know that PR campaigns are meant to skew perspective, right? They're meant to make the consumer feel a certain way about a product or a company. And so the fact that that's involved with this is, to me, really concerning.
I know. You know, a newspaper can't just write a story about a measles outbreak and talk objectively about measles, and then give a suggestion. You know, go talk to your doctor about getting a measles vaccine, or check with your doctor to see if you've had your measles vaccine. It's not just simple and straightforward. They have to put all this fear into it.
Well, instead of just
these catchy phrases and sound bites that scare the reader, and the reader runs to their doctor's office asking for an extra measles vaccine because the article they just read was so filled with PR versus just neutral, objective.
Yeah, but because what you're saying is there's an opinion at the end of it.
Right.
So throughout there were
it's a strategy. It's not just an opinion. It's you're right. It's a whole PR strategy.
Oh, it's designed to incite action.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But the opinion. So this goes back to journalism, like the point of journalism, right? Isn't the point to just news organizations? We want to just reflect on what's happening and to objectively give just the facts. Just, they would say, just the facts, ma'am. Isn't that like kind of the old saying? And you have like the hat in the 40s, like, just the facts, ma'am. Anyway, that was my really terrible impression. Yeah, back when I was a child, and I only got 3 vaccines.
Yes.
But the whole point of journalists at that point were just to give, it's just to give information. And like you're saying, let's say there is an outbreak, which could be less than 10 individuals, for example. And in the article, they're saying there's an outbreak, but they always jump to the opinion of whatever their narrative is, which is, and it was because of unvaccinated. Researchers say it's because of the unvaccinated that this is happening again. And so they've taken what was just information and they've led you to a belief system about what that means and who's to blame and who's the victim and whatever. And so essentially it's the opposite of journalism. And I found kind of an interesting quote here about journalism, talking about fear, how they use fear.
Did you hear that on tape?
He's hungry and his stomach was just contributing to the podcast. So this was in a really interesting article in Psychology Today. And she says, talking about journalism, if it bleeds, it leads, which we've heard that before. Fear-based media, news is a money-making industry. And the article says, in previous decades, the journalistic mission was to report the news as it actually happened, with fairness, balance, and integrity. However, capitalistic motives associated with journalism have forced much of today's news to look to the controversial as news stories. It's no longer a race to get the facts right. Instead, it's to acquire good ratings in order to get advertisers. So it comes down to the bottom line is it's about money. Well, that shouldn't surprise anybody except for the fact that when it comes to vaccines, who are the advertisers? And so we'll get more into that later. But one of the big things I always try to tell parents is who is behind the information that you're getting. So when it comes to the media, you think it's fair reporting, but of course, we're acknowledging it's not. And we're not the only ones that acknowledge that. Like anybody that pays attention to the media understands that this is no longer just the facts anymore. Oh my gosh, your stomach is very upset with this media situation, and rightly so. And anyway, do you want to add to like this whole concept of who's behind it, the fact that there's an agenda, like how that's shaping what we're hearing before we go into what are the typical sound bites?
Right. Yeah. Because the soundbite part of this, I think, is the most fun. But yeah, I mean, I think people have to realize that, that the media is, their number one advertiser is pharma.
I don't think people understand that.
Right. Everyone fast forwards through commercials now anyway, because everything's on your DVR. But if you took time to watch commercials, you would see a pharma commercial in almost every commercial break. Sometimes two. Some of those are vaccine commercials. Some of those are medication commercials.
But can I just interrupt really fast just to say, like, when you listen to those, my goodness, like, it's only just a small portion about something you don't realize. It's very vague, right? It's always vague. So it's like, do you feel unhappy? And everybody's like, yes, I do. I do.
Gosh.
Right. Like,
can you fix that?
Are you tired at times? I am. And talk to your doctor about this. And it's just like, I need to go get that. Right. But then at the end of all that, there's like a full 60 seconds of all the things that could go wrong once you take this mystery drug and how you could potentially die a really awful death. But there's always a smiling person holding hands with somebody else at the end of it. So I just had to,
but people have to realize that, that any news story you're watching on the news, or you're reading in a newspaper, or reading in a magazine, or reading online, if pharma is advertising with that company, you have to be very naive if you're going to think that the way that company is sharing that information is not influenced by the pharma,
or what's allowed to be on that news program or news network. Didn't Robert Kennedy Jr., he's the one that talks about 70% of advertising on major news networks comes from pharmaceutical companies.
Wow.
And he even mentioned that he has friends that are network executives, network presidents, who said, I cannot have you on our network, even though I believe in what you're saying. And a lot of his mission is, getting rid of mercury-making vaccines, safer, the dangers with the ingredients.
Right.
And he cannot even talk about that, which is completely factual, completely data-based. He is an attorney. Because the network president said, you have to understand my position. I've got, our advertisers, the majority of our advertisers are pharmaceutical companies. They will not let me say this, have this on here. So like you're saying, it's already funneled into what's acceptable information to be on the news anyway. So people have to understand, if you are seeing it on a major news network, it is not going to be exposing any other side of this debate, because they are just not allowed to do that.
Right. And it's sad. So we want to, I think, walk you through some of these really fun and catchy media sound bites that, if you're someone who's in this fight, you just rolled your eyes at me, Melissa, because I roll my eyes every time I see one of these sound bites.
Well, so predictable, I know how, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like they've got somebody in their earpiece telling them, don't forget the 5 bullet points you have to mention, because you don't just see it on your news programs. You see it in any written article that's like, CBS.com, or any of your main newspapers with their, online publication. You see it everywhere. So it's not just on your nightly news. We're talking about any time you see a news organization talking about this, you will guaranteed, at least see or hear 3 of what we're going to tell you, at least.
Let's say them all.
Sometimes it's only these, though. Sometimes there's nothing else but these. Yeah. Like, this is literally the only thing that's ever said are these quotes from the reputable people, and it's just this one quote. They don't expand on it at all. They just say this thing over and over again, and we'll talk about why. Right. Go ahead.
So I'll say you say the first 3, I'll say the
Okay, so the number one, then this has to be number one. Like, I'd actually say the number one thing that I hear the most, that I keep hearing and will be everywhere, anywhere that has to do with this debate, is vaccines are safe and effective. They're safe and effective. Did you know?
Are vaccines safe?
No, they're safe and effective.
And effective?
And effective. Wow. And it's proven, and it has a period after the end, and there is nothing more to say because they are safe and they are effective. And that's really all you need to know.
I guess this is our last podcast
this is the end. It's been really fun. So thank you so much.
All right.
But no, I mean, like, if you're a parent, that's all you need to hear. They're safe and effective. Okay, so my kid's not going to get hurt by them, and they totally work every time. Sign me up. I'm really good. No need to question anything. They're safe and effective. Every news anchor that leads with a story about this will say, there's a measles outbreak, and it's due to the unvaccinated. And researchers have shown time and time again that vaccines are safe and effective. Yet there are some parents that choose to ignore this settled science. So, okay, safe and effective. Why don't you go to the second one?
Yeah, so the next one is vaccines save lives. And in fact, that's almost part of the first one. You'll actually see vaccines are safe and effective, period. Vaccines save lives. I see them often together, and it's the greatest invention of the modern era. And,
well, plus, if you were to say anything against it, it'd be like, don't you know what these have done for our country and and the world in general?
Right.
And this is the greatest invention of like modern time. How dare you say anything negative? I mean, don't you know what vaccines do? And of course, the first thing I always hear is, you want polio to come back? You know, like that tends to be like the traditional response because vaccines have saved the world. They've saved the world.
And what I find interesting is you won't see vaccines are safe and effective, vaccines save lives in a vaccine commercial. Because then they have to have the guy with the low voice that talks really fast at the end that actually says, vaccines save lives. Oh, and vaccines can cause this, and that.
That's true.
It's only in the PR media sound bites, not in actual advertising.
News articles. But I just want to reinforce before we go to the next one that news does not necessarily mean these are objective facts anymore. That's just not what news means anymore. So when you hear the anchor on Channel 4 say vaccines are safe and effective, that is not a guarantee of some factual information, because there is no factual information, we'll talk about that can really back that up, that kind of statement.
Because if you were going to factually say vaccines save lives, you would also have to factually say, and vaccines do have some fatal reactions in some. And they're not going to say that.
And if you said they're effective, you'd also have to say, and they don't work in many people.
Right. And they don't always work. Right?
Yeah, which of course is not going to sell anything.
So we're going to get into why. Yeah. So go.
We have so much to talk about. Like I'm just realizing
that
was number 2. I'm on number 3.
Autism and vaccine connection has been proven false.
It's been debunked. Don't you remember?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's been completely debunked.
Yeah. What I think is funny is, you'll hear science has proven vaccines don't cause autism. The connection has been debunked. You always hear the word debunked as if debunked is the ultimate way to prove something is not true.
Well, and even when some anchor is trying to appear to be fair and objective, they might say, some parents have concerns over things like autism. What do you say to that, Dr. whoever? One of their, 2 go-to people that they always go to. And the doctor will come back and say, that connection has been debunked right away. It's a conversation ender.
And the word debunked, I think, has a connotation of making you almost feel foolish if you disagree.
Totally.
Like that word is
stupid for even asking.
Right. Exactly.
How dumb are you? Wait, I just want to say, with your Google degree, how dumb are you to even question something? And, so I'm in the process of reading this new book by J.B. Hanley, and he actually talks about that. And I definitely want to go into that, this concept of even asking the question. And he calls it they're exasperated to have to respond to you. They act as if, I cannot believe we've gone over this again and again. Okay. There is no connection. It's debunked. So that's one of the first things. So I've done a couple news segments myself about my own family. And even if you don't mention autism, because that was not the case for our family, just mentioning a vaccine reaction like a seizure to the DTaP vaccine, in that conversation, they will still say, but hasn't it been proven that vaccines don't cause autism? I'm like, who even mentioned autism?
I didn't say autism. My kid had a seizure.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about autism.
It's as long as vaccines don't cause autism, that's okay. That's all that matters, because it's okay that they cause all kinds of other neurological
and they just
injuries.
Redirect. So that's another one of the big
package inserts.
Yeah, it's all about redirecting the conversation.
I want to touch on herd immunity, because the 4th soundbite is, you always hear people say 95 vaccination rate is needed to preserve herd immunity. And I'm actually going to say that is a 100% complete lie. I'll tell you where that came from.
It's a non-truth.
Yeah, it is a non-truth. Okay, they're not lying to you.
Let's be gentle.
They're just telling you a non-truth. And we'll wait till we circle back to this this particular soundbite.
Plus, the herd immunity will be its own episode.
I know, but I look forward to sharing you a study that I just found that I'll tell you where the 95% number came from. And I think you'll find it almost foolish that people actually apply that number to every single vaccine there is now. When you hear where it comes from.
And herd immunity is one of the sound bites that's mentioned a lot because the reason that they do this, and this kind of ties into the next one, which is vaccination is important because of those who are too weak or too young to be vaccinated. These are the immunocompromised. So herd immunity ties into what's considered community responsibility. Part of what each of these articles will say is not only are vaccines safe and effective, not only do they save lives, not only has any correlation to autism been debunked, but we need everybody to be vaccinated so that we can keep herd immunity up for those who cannot get vaccinated. We must protect them. It is your responsibility to do that for your community at large, right? So this is all about community responsibility. This is kind of like a little guilt. There's a little guilt in there,
yes.
For Johnny. Little boy Johnny who has some type of condition and he can't get vaccinated. But as you and I have talked about and you've said in town halls, he shouldn't be going to school anyway because, legitimately he can catch so many other things that will put him at risk. But assuming he's in a full-on school with everybody else, which doesn't really seem like makes the most sense, but let's say he is, everybody else is supposed to get vaccinated with this completely safe and effective, essentially like a saline, it's so easy. It's such a simple thing. They're supposed to do that as part of this need to get to the herd immunity threshold.
Right.
Because otherwise we're going to have crazy outbreaks. If we drop below 90%, 95%, we're going to have these crazy outbreaks, which of course we know is not true because of waning immunity. We'll talk about that later. Like we're way below 95% as a whole in our population in general.
And the last media soundbite is vaccine reactions are 1 in a million. You hear that over and over again, and that is another untruth.
Yes, a non-truth, yes.
That's another non-truth.
That's a pro-lie.
We'll talk about how common vaccine reactions. So let's circle back to the favorite, safe and effective. And I don't think I do a lot of live news media interviews anymore because I don't think stations like to do live news interviews with people that are kind of more neutral on vaccines. But when I hear safe and effective, I always want to, I talk to the TV or the commentator. I always, yell at the TV. What do you mean safe and effective?
Right.
And I wish I could have a chance to confront someone. What do you mean by safe and effective? Do you mean it's safe for 100% of people? Is it safe for 99% of people?
Do we even know what that percentage is? I mean, that's the truth.
What do you mean? And is there some sort of legal definition of safe? And I'll tell you from a medical standpoint, what I consider what they actually really mean when they say vaccines are safe and effective. What they're saying medically is that vaccines have passed the FDA safety approval process. We did a whole bunch of safety research ourselves on our own product.
On one vaccine.
Right, on one vaccine.
One
We showed that safety research to the FDA. It's okay that some of the people on the FDA board hold stock in our company. That's okay. Don't worry about it. The FDA looks at our safety research. They approve that vaccine saying, okay, the number of side effects were low enough. The number of severe reactions was low enough that we consider this vaccine to be safe enough to be an approved medical treatment in our country. That's technically what they mean by safe. But
safe enough. Well, I like when you say that.
You're right.
Safe enough.
I mean, I would love to see a news commentator say, vaccines are safe enough and effective enough. Mm-hmm. If they said it that way, or they came clean and said, the vaccines are safe enough, in that they pass the FDA approval process, like all medications.
Because we don't really know how many they're safe enough for. We really don't. I mean, that's the thing that's hard. And because, like you're saying, and we'll talk about vaccine safety a bunch, because they're studying one particular vaccine, and that one particular vaccine is never given by itself because things are given in combination.
I know, and that's a really, really critical point to make about the mantra vaccines are safe. because they've actually never studied the complete vaccine schedule, the CDC recommended vaccine schedule, all 69 doses. They actually don't have any safety research on that. So you can hear vaccines are safe and effective in the media all the time. Now you know that only applies to individual vaccines or in some combinations. And a media person or a doctor can say that till they're blue in the face. But what they can't tell you, medically or scientifically, is that they know the CDC schedule of vaccinations are safe. No one can tell you that scientifically. And if they do try to say that to you, they're lying to you, because we know they have not researched it. And the Institute of Medicine in 2013 published a review of vaccine safety, and they admitted we have not studied the entire vaccine schedule to look to see if there are serious problems or long-term consequences of it. So that's a very critical distinction that people need to realize when they hear these mantras.
So we don't know who is safe enough to receive this and who will be effective enough for, because of the efficacy depends on the individual's body. There are a whole bunch of reasons why a vaccine, even if you get it, this is something I hear all the time. I got my flu shot. Like, people just assume that guarantees them protection, but that's not how vaccines work. Like, vaccines do not work for everyone, even if you go and get it. So you have your proof of your $19 Costco flu shot. That does not mean that you are not going to get it. And it doesn't mean that you don't have the potential of spreading it to somebody else. So your community responsibility of making sure others who can't get the vaccine, it doesn't mean that that is what happened. So when they say effective, they're making it sound like it's guaranteed. You got the vaccine, you're never getting it. You're never getting it. But it's just not true.
Right. And what people need to understand about vaccine efficacy is most vaccines don't actually prevent you from catching the germ, and having your respiratory or nasal tract or your intestinal tract actually becoming infected with that germ, and you are now going to become contagious with that germ to others.
Putting other people at risk.
Right, yeah, and putting other people at risk. For most people, that vaccine is just going to reduce the severity of your symptoms in a lot of cases. You'll just feel less sick, but you'll be just as contagious as the person that was not vaccinated and caught the disease.
But isn't that almost more risky, because you're thinking that you're totally protected, don't have anything going on. You're putting yourself in public situations where
exactly, because you're not that sick. You're just as contagious, but you don't feel as sick.
Right.
So you're not going to stay at home. You're still going to go to work. You're still going to go to school.
And this is an asymptomatic carrier, right?
But this could be a vaccine that's perfectly effective, in quotes. You can't see my air quotes, but, well, Melissa can, but I'm doing air quotes.
Really good air quotes, by the way.
Vaccines are safe and effective. Everyone automatically means that you're right. It means 100% shield is around you. You cannot become infected. You cannot be contagious to everybody. Whereas what they really mean is it's effective to the degree in how that vaccine was designed. This vaccine, like say tetanus vaccine, was designed so that if you ever get tetanus in a wound, you won't become paralyzed. But the vaccine doesn't actually stop you from getting tetanus germs in your wound. Same is true for whooping cough vaccine. Yeah. Same is true for diphtheria vaccine, the injected polio vaccine, even the flu vaccine. These vaccines still will all allow you to become infected with a germ and spread it to others. So when they say effective, you assume like the connotation. But the idea is that if it's going to protect everyone around you, not only you, but everyone around you. Whereas the reality is people need to realize that the vaccines are not effective in the way that the media will claim they are.
Right, which is why we're definitely going to.
And then some are effective. I think some do prevent you from actually becoming infected with that germ and becoming contagious to others. There are some, but that's a minority. And so safe and effective really, and I like to maybe point out some vaccines have such a low efficacy, especially like the flu vaccine. Sometimes it's only 20% effective, not in making you not contagious, but it's just 20% effective in you not feeling as sick. And some vaccines, they actually had to fake some of the efficacy research. If we ever talk about a mumps vaccine, there's a federal case we'll talk about. But anyway, vaccines, safe and effective really has a whole different meaning if you really understand vaccines, because there's a whole lot of potential side effects that happen to people.
And past these points, so we said safe and effective, vaccines save lives. There's no autism connection, which we know there's a lot of new research that people don't know about.
Well, let's talk about the autism vaccine connection, because you hear people say that, and I think the uninformed consumer is just going to say, "Oh, good, they've proven it's false. They've proven vaccines can't cause autism." Well, scientifically, and let's talk science, because everyone likes to talk about science because it's settled. Scientifically, you can't prove that something doesn't cause something else.
Right.
You can't scientifically design an experiment that's going to look at vaccines and prove vaccines don't cause autism. You can only prove a positive. You can't prove a negative. So you can only look for associations. So when someone does a bunch of vaccine autism research, all they can conclude is, in our study, we did not find an association between vaccines and autism. That's a completely different thing than saying we've proven they don't cause autism. Right. And if you do a lot of online video watching, you'll see there was a very popular doctor and a couple of lawyers at like a dinner party talking about vaccines and autism. And they actually talked about this very issue and said, you can't say that in media. You can't explain why we can't prove vaccines don't cause autism, because people are going to be afraid, oh my gosh, now you can't prove it. So what if it's true? What if vaccines do cause autism?
But I mean, isn't that the point is that we don't know. We don't know.
Right.
That's the point. It has not been proven that it's not. But we know that there are definitely positive associations in studies that have the new studies that have been done that we're coming across, or that I'm reading about too, especially in JB's book, that more recent stuff. But I think the big issue is that these studies that have been done before that have not found the positive outcome that you're talking about are done on children that are vaccinated with one particular vaccine and children that are totally vaccinated with everything else but that one vaccine. So it's not like you're actually comparing kids that have never received vaccines, which the problem with that is that the other ingredients, the adjuvants, it might not be the culpability of one particular vaccine, but overall what's inside all of the vaccines and the combinations. So they're comparing to kids who have also had vaccines. So like, you know what I mean? Like you might show there's no positive outcome here when it relates to autism, but that doesn't mean that that the study was done in a way that really shows if there is a positive outcome or not.
Yeah, and we'll probably have to do a whole episode. 2 episodes. In fact, we'll probably get JB on the show and see if he can walk us through his books at some point. So herd immunity. Let me tell you real quick where the 95% vaccination number comes from. And
we should find out really quickly. We might want to take this into a part 2 if we need to. We'll keep going. So, there's so much to talk about.
Okay, so I was wondering the other day, where does the fact in quotes, air quotes, that you need 95% vaccination coverage to preserve herd immunity?
Okay.
Where does that come from? So I emailed our buddy Hector, our numbers guy, and he got right back to me. That fact, in air quotes, comes from a 1983 study done at Johns Hopkins University. It was published in the American Journal of Epidemiology. It was called Measles and Rubella in the United States, and it was by Heathcote. You can look it up yourself. But essentially, if you hear the fact that 95% vaccination coverage is needed to preserve herd immunity, you would assume they've researched that. You would have assumed they've looked at outbreaks of measles and rubella and chickenpox. They've studied, hundreds of thousands of kids and found, gosh, if less than 95% are vaccinated, then we lose herd immunity and there's big outbreaks. There'd be an assumption they've studied that. They have not. This was a mathematical exercise. Now, you're a math genius, and you know a lot about math. I want to give you this. I want to give you this article. If you look at this article, it's hilarious. I'm just going to hold it up for you, Melissa. You can see the math equations at the end. Where is it? Here, 2 pages of math equations.
Let me see. Let me verify this work was done correctly.
That prove you need 95% vaccine coverage to preserve herd immunity.
They didn't carry the one.
They didn't carry. Okay, there you go. So
that's where the problem
solved. No, but this was a mathematical exercise. Someone sat at their desk and did a whole bunch of math.
So what you're saying is it's theoretical.
It's theoretical.
Yeah.
Yet, That was in 1983. There's not been a single real life study that's actually shown that to be true, but you hear people over and over again quoting, we need 95% immunity. And that strikes fear, because if someone's sitting there and says, oh no, what if in my neighborhood we only have 94%? Right. Should I let my kids go outside to play?
Or when people talk about these pockets of unvaccinated,
are my
they're
neighbors
saying,
vaccinated?
Yeah, they might say in this city, or in this school, there's a 50% rate, and people are thinking, oh my God, that leaves me totally exposed.
Right.
And now we are susceptible for a mass outbreak.
Yeah, the truth is they really don't know what percent vaccine coverage is needed for herd immunity. This mathematical exercise was only performed on measles and rubella. You'll hear them, they'll have them apply it to all vaccines, whooping cough, polio, everything. So now our listeners, the truth, that where that number comes from and why that media soundbite is another non-truth.
Well, and just the concept of herd immunity, obviously, we're going to be covering that as well, because that breaks down into the difference between artificial induced immunity, natural immunity, herd immunity.
That's a fun one. I can't wait.
And so many people are like, the people that have done research in immunology say herd immunity, technically this is a myth only because as adults, our vaccines have waned over time. And so typically what you're looking at with a population is, maybe 50%, like on any given day. You're not at 94 anyway. So getting to that 95 isn't going to somehow save our entire society from extinction, which is sort of how they portray it.
Right.
And of course the guilt is the big thing with the immunocompromised, because it's one, a lot of people come back to this argument and we talk about choice, and we could almost do an entire other episode on that. I really think we could almost go into part 2, because there's the whole section on the bottom on media, but we can run through it and see what we get through and add to it. Yeah,
I think we're when it comes to immunocompromised, whenever I'm in that situation, and Melissa already touched on this, in that immunocompromised kids are way more likely to catch diseases that we don't even have vaccines for.
Right.
Which are many.
Right.
Number one. Number two, most vaccines don't prevent the spread of a disease from a vaccinated person to an immunocompromised person. So it doesn't matter if that immunocompromised person is around a vaccinated person or an unvaccinated person. It doesn't matter for most vaccines. You can still pass it to the person. Plus, we know that some vaccines will actually pass diseases. Live virus vaccines will actually pass that infective germ to an immunocompromised person.
Right.
Right. So, but I think let's wrap up. Vaccines are 1 in a million.
And I think we'll talk about that with vaccine safety.
Yeah, vaccine safety.
I'm more concerned with what comes after that, because
go for it.
Well, the thing that I'm really interested in behind all of this. So here are the sound bites. You've talked about some of the the technical basis behind them, but the bigger issue here is understanding that there is a PR campaign happening around this issue, and the media is part of that PR campaign. They are phrasing this entire debate in a certain way, and they want you to believe a certain way about it, or should we say their advertisers want you to feel a certain way about it. And it's a type of what I think it's a type of psychological manipulation.
Well, we introed with all this, didn't we?
We mentioned it. Yeah. So, but because this is such a reality, it's hard not to bring this up almost probably in every episode in some way or another. But the fact is that this is being branded. Right? It's being branded a certain way to control how people think. And it's a way to have people perceive vaccine makers in a certain way. So not just the product, but the makers. They're out for our good. They're trying to help us. And thank goodness for them in that, for that reason. And we talked about fear as being a big motivator. I think that really has to be discussed, because fear, like you said, we'll probably have tons of articles that we'll be able to actually read through on a podcast and break it down. Every time you talk about the first death of the flu season, I just saw that one, and we'll talk about that article, is that's in the title, right? Because right away you want people to feel scared, that because fear is a huge motivator. And they're trying to motivate you into action. And so we talked about who's behind the PR campaign. It's pharmaceutical companies that are selling their product, but unfortunately they're using what's supposed to be a neutral venue, which is the media, to help shape public opinion on this issue. And that's why we like having this conversation with people, is because this is a conversation you're not going to really have anywhere else, where it's just talking about the information. And it's important to know that the advertisers are the ones that are responsible for what you feel about everything to do with the vaccine debate. This whole thing is based on carefully planned, carefully orchestrated campaigns and marketing and branding. And some of the ads that people don't realize are these viral posts sometimes you see on Facebook. It'll be a viral post about somebody who has some type of disease, like, oh, my child had measles, and oh my God, you guys, I don't want you to have to go through this. And it might be from 2012, but they find a way to recirculate it again. And all of a sudden that's the panic of, oh my God, this looks awful. I better get my kid vaccinated right away. And so that all of these elements, all these posts and these news stories that you see are all carefully orchestrated to kind of come to the same conclusion. And I think that people need to understand that it's all by design and it's not completely objective, if at all objective.
Right. And I think I can close with this. I think something that really concerns me is a darker side of the agenda that I think is behind this. It's not only to sell vaccines, because again, pharma, they have the right to sell vaccines. It's the way they put all these sound bites together, safe and effective. They save lives. They don't cause autism. We need herd immunity at a certain level. Got to protect the immunocompromised. And don't worry, vaccines are 1 in a million. I think their agenda is trying to set up the people who don't buy into the pharma agenda and who do have concerns about vaccines, people that don't get vaccines. The agenda is to paint them as dangerous and dirty, illogical, unsafe to be around. Because if you can figure out that a small portion of your community is unsafe and dirty, then it somehow makes it okay to discriminate against them.
And that's
and you can take away their rights.
Totally a whole other
I feel like that's one of the agendas of why
you're saying discrediting a certain group of people so that therefore when they go legislatively try to take things away, then you're not going to feel so badly about the fact that these people are having their rights taken away because they're putting you at risk anyway. So they're kind of the bad guy and we want to keep them away from us. And that is a type of polarization that you can see in this debate. It's intended to polarize people, to put where we have seen this before, parent against parent. They're trying to pit parent against parent so that we are not united in the quest for safer vaccines, safe kids, and a healthy population. They're trying to put it where it's us against each other. Right. And that's kind of the what I've seen across the board. Yeah,
and the reality is that we've talked about the middle ground, and this will be an episode, but I think if you really asked enough people, I think most people would agree that, vaccines might be important. They might be useful in certain ways. But the majority, I think, would agree that they should never be mandatory. And that if you really look at the science, unvaccinated families are safe and healthy people too. And that this does not have to be something that causes discrimination, and that we should all be able to be a society that gets along and understands understands each other instead of as fighting against each other, like you said.
Yeah, but and that whole mandated thing all comes down to people believing these sound bites that we just talked about.
Exactly.
Like in order to mandate, you have to believe all these things. And so if you don't believe one of those bullet points, it puts that whole entire program and that agenda at risk, which is something that they don't want.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, that was fun.
Whew.
That was really cool. I like that. So what do you, next? I don't know. It's a toss up.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. They're going to have to tune in to episode 3 to find out what we're talking about.
No, we got to tell them.
If we tell them every time, because what if they might not find that particular topic interesting?
Well, how can they not?
Listen?
How can they not?
It's not the most interesting concept.
Well, you're right, because I feel like our next two topics we decided are kind of a little tedious.
No, they're super exciting, come check them out.
It's an informed consent, or it's
the
vaccine schedule explained.
You didn't hear that. Okay, so we'll catch you next time on episode 3. Bye.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.